today we're talking about the future of developer productivity. And I've got Ori Keren here from LinearB and Dharmesh Thakker from Battery Ventures. So just give us a moment, give a round of applause for our guests that have joined us today. So this session it's a little bit about the opinions of the people on this stage, but we also have a lot of really brilliant people in this room, and that's why we've brought you here. So, we're going to share our predictions about the next 12 to 24 months, but we're also just as interested in what you out there in the audience think is going to happen. So, there will be some opportunity for you to share your perspectives during this session. So, don't be shy. I know you're all eating now, but, as you finish up your food, you can, participate a little more. But we really want you to learn from us, but also from the people around you. And so if we can get to our predictions, we have 5 predictions about the future of developer productivity. And before we get into that, I've heard actually that Ori, that you have a bold prediction that you want to make.
Yeah, we were talking about it in the podcast that we recorded together. And my bold prediction says that even though there's a lot of levers to pull to increase developer productivity in the next year, I think because we're still in the norming, storming phase, developer productivity is actually going to decline in 2025. I think people are still experimenting with a lot of technologies, and they still don't know how to gather them together. And before, in every change, what happens is you get a small dip before you kind of get your processes together. And I think 2026, 2027 is where we see the peak. But 2025 is still going to be challenging with a lot of experiments, and actually predict developer productivity will decline a bit.
Yeah, I think it's a really great observation, because 2024 almost felt like it was the year really to experiment with a lot of the AI technologies that are out there. And, businesses, and engineering leaders, they get some room to experiment, but eventually you have to start showing the fruits of that experimentation. So I think people are going to see that, a lot of our predictions today really are centered around all of the new generative AI changes that are happening and how it's impacting, your senior developers versus non-technical people within your organization. And also how this is going to impact how organizations respond to DevX concerns over the next couple of years. So with that said, I want to really just jump into this first prediction we have about AI-powered development tools. Because there's, a lot that, I feel like a day doesn't go by at this point where I'm not talking about these things. Particularly, I feel like agentic AI is coming through a lot. But, we should all be familiar already with the code generation and auto-completion tools that are out there. So this is things like GitHub Copilot, OpenAI, I believe, has a tool that works within this. There's quite a few other competitors that have emerged on the market. And really what these are doing are enabling developers to write code faster, often with fewer errors, with, obviously some exceptions to that. And I think one thing that we can probably expect is more specialized AI models that are tailored for specific programming conditions. So I wonder if that aligns with what you two are hearing from the market, is it going to be the name of the game with AI, particularly around auto completion, going to be in customizing it to workflows?
Yes, I think I would invite you to. I think the industry now is ready to experiment with, and we've seen it in the last year. Every second software company is experimenting with what we call assisted workflows, where it's like a Copilot or something that helps you with the AI-based review, I can see a lot of energy putting into that. We're trying to measure the productivity coming out of it. It's still like controversial. If it's like you can see a lot of more throughput, but on the other hand, sometimes the code churns faster out of those systems. So definitely in everything that's like assisted, where you have a developer that still leads the effort, we can see organizations experimenting with it, and a lot of cool things are happening. Now, if you move to agentic use cases, which is where the future is, I think it's almost like a year behind. You don't still see, you see early experiments, but you don't see confidence of organizations to go and deploy, like, I don't know, an agent that takes like a simple task from a Jira queue and issues a PR, or an agent that does like fixes a bug, or an agent that looks in SRE problems and fix them, and security scans or whatever. And I think it's going to take time. It's probably going to take like 2 or 3 more years for people to feel more confident with that. It's almost like autonomous cars, like the technology was there, but then you had to put a lot of regulation. Same thing I think is going to happen in software. The technology is going to be there next year, but there's still a lot of problems to solve around IP, like who's owning the IP, around like legal implications, around compliance, SOC 2, all that type of problems. So technology will move faster, but it's still going to take time to streamline all these things into like mainstream development. But
yeah. I'm happy to add some color. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me here. There's so much depth that we covered in the last panel. I'm like a big pictures guy, but it's great to see how all this great work is coming together. Your question, Ben's, about whether AI tools will be ubiquitous. Makes total sense. Like, you think about like 5 million developers in the US, on average getting paid 100 to 200K. It's like almost $500 billion like that is being spent, but there's so much work that is BS work. You got to go, fix syntax issues. You got to do documentation. You got to grade unit tests. All this ancillary work that no developer, got a CS degree to go work on can be automated, and just makes economic sense. For companies, it makes sense because they can take their most valuable resources and point them to driving innovation instead of fixing syntax issues. For the developer, the experience is so much better because they can focus on more fulfilling work. And for the customer, it's better because you can push code, hopefully higher quality code faster. And so for all those reasons, the economics of these tools makes a ton of sense. The problem right now is there's just so much fragmentation. It's like a games business. Every week there's a new tool. It's like Copilot. Now there's Codium and Cursor and Magic and Poolside. There's like 20 different tools. And so I feel like in 2025 or perhaps 26, you'll see the market converge to a couple of these tools that become the enterprise standard or the startup standard. But right now there's a lot of fragmentation, but it definitely makes a lot of sense. Agentic is like 2 steps beyond that. Once you standardize on a set of tools and best practices on how code assist works, how PR automation works, what you guys talked about with LinearB last time, how you push that code to customers and do A/B testing with customers. Once we standardize on that process, then we can go implement that in agentic manner. But I think that's like at least 2-3 years away. So that's my prediction in that.
Yeah, and I think you're actually answering one of the questions that I have, and that is, will, by the year 2026, so after this next year, will developers actually trust the reviews that they get from these AI models? Like, is that the point where, like, will we be able to get there that quickly? But it seems like both of you think we're more in the like 2 to 3 year mark before we can really start to see, like, maximize the productivity impact of these. You think that's accurate?
You mean you're asking if like developers will get a review from like a model and you say, hey, I trust the review 100%?
Yeah, I mean, I think today there's so much skepticism. It's like a trust but verify, right? Like we always have to verify everything that comes out of these models, it feels like.
I'm still looking for the developers that will look at a peer review and trust it 100%. So I think it's kind of going to be the same. Like some of the comments you will accept, some of the comments you will say, hey, maybe you don't understand the broader context. So, but that's when it becomes reality. So that's my answer.
Yeah. Developers trust open source. They trust cloud environments the code runs on. They trust peer reviews. If a system's going to learn from prior PR merges and apply a bunch of automation and intelligence to it, and it's not something that they want to spend a lot of time on, they would rather be writing more source code. I think there's every reason why the system can be trusted. However, you would still go verify some of the more extreme cases, some of the more important builds. But we're certainly saying, our firm is involved with 100 and call it 200 companies that range anywhere from 5 million to 3 or 4 billion. The whole notion of PR merges getting automated, at least the low end PR merges getting automated, is very, very standard right now. I don't think there is a trust issue, but you got to verify the more complex issues. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious. So I mentioned this would be a little bit of interaction here. So I'm curious from the audience. So we have 3 technologies here listed that we think are going to be a big part of AI over the next 3 years. Auto completion, text generation, agentic AI, code reviews. Just by a show of hands, how many of you are actively adopting or experimenting with at least one of these? Yeah, that's what I expected. It's definitely most of the audience. Now I'm curious if there's any of you out there that are doing all 3 of them. I've got one hand in the bag. Would you be interested in sharing anything about your story of like adopting this? Not to put you on the spot. You can tell me no. We have a microphone that you can speak into.
I didn't expect to think about it, but I will. So there was a lot of hesitance among some of the members of our team. Our team is small, 8 people, all engineers, and some of the people have been professionals for 20 years, and so they've seen all of these waves of AI. They've been very against it. But where they have relented is on the more mundane boilerplate code, like all these frameworks require. And so the code generation, auto completion, that was really easy for them to see the value. And then we rely heavily on Rust. So when the automation makes mistakes, the compiler will tell us. So it's a combination. Like Rust kind of makes it a little more safe to adopt this. And I think other languages will start to adopt some of that intelligence in their compilers over time. On the automated bug fixing and code reviews, we have thousands and thousands of dependencies. And so keeping those dependencies updated would be a whole job function for us maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And we don't even review, like we have a bot that reviews another bot opening those update PRs or dependency maintenance PRs, which is really nice. And then for the agentic, it's really about, we try to keep a pulse on what's happening outside of our world. Like we have our customers, we have our Slack, and then we have like our internal communications. But we felt probably about 8 months ago that the world was moving much faster and we had to be really concerned about local maxima. So we constantly are pulling in data that matches, like new posts that match certain keywords. They come from a variety of feeds ranging from Google News to Hacker News, and they are experimenting. Like an agent that we have nothing to do with will propose new prototypes, new bounties even, to bring in other humans, and we're constantly trying to keep our finger on the pulse. And so are our customers too.
That's great. It's a great story, and actually very amazing. I mean, it seems like you're probably. I mean, you're ahead of the curve in this audience, at least.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's great to see so much adoption.
Weaving, for instance, they like so. Dharmesh and I are both involved in this company called Weaviate. They do all three of these too, for sure. So that's like a vector database. Bob says hi, but like it's a vector database. It's open source, and so their agent lives in Slack. And if you ask a question, like you need some help with a feature or a new API or a new syntax, it'll just respond and drop in the docs. That's one example, but there's a ton of other examples of agentic workflows within their business, within our business, within most businesses, I would say, at least that I know about,
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate the insight. And for anyone else out there that's eager to share their thoughts, there will be more opportunities, so don't worry. So before we move on to the next insight, I want to ask both of you, like, what do you think is going to be the biggest impact to developers over the next year or so in terms of the impact of these new AI tools?
I think the near-term impact in 12 months, I think engineers are doubling down as data scientists, right? There used to be where you create a model and then you provide that to engineers to go write an application on top. I think the role of the AI engineer is like doubling down, saying, hey, you have these extremely powerful foundational models accessible through an AI or through an API. You can now iterate through your application logic, make sure the model's not hallucinating, and you're doubling down as a data scientist and a software engineer, and you're implementing much higher order logic that customers benefit from. So I think your AI engineer role is getting super elevated, is much higher efficacy more so than throughput. It's not about the lines of code. It's how you can impact the business by combining application logic with foundational models wrapped into a killer application at record speed. So I think the role's becoming really important and they're doubling down as data scientists.
Yeah, if I can add, I think it's almost like every developer role you will need to complement with some AI capabilities. We're hiring right now and we need a full stack, engineer with AI capabilities. We need a backend engineer with AI capabilities. By the way, they don't need to write the models or they have to be the best data scientists, but they need to know how to leverage them. Where do the models sit? What's the do's and the don'ts? What can they consume, etc. So I think it's going to transform a lot of like their roles. I don't know if we're going to talk about it later.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. And it's a great segue actually into our next key prediction. So, and that is the senior developer, once the slides catch up, we're a little slow, but the senior developer is going to become more valuable in your organization. So I think there's this common belief that generative AI is having a bigger impact on the lower skill developers, like your junior developers or fresh graduates. But more and more research is coming out that seems to indicate that it's actually your senior developers, in fact, that not only going to reap the most benefits, but are going to be the ones that you're going to depend on the most heavily. So I think the key things that are driving this, again, AI is going to show up in a lot of these. But, natural language interfaces are dramatically shifting, how people learn new technologies and skills. In fact, this technology really is here today. And I think if you're looking for one use case to adopt when it comes to AI, it's giving your developers something like ChatGPT or Copilot or a tool where they can have a natural language interface into their code base. And with really the key benefit being knowledge and skills acquisition, so they can more rapidly achieve proficiency in new tools or technologies or processes. Gen AI is also likely to introduce a lot of new bottlenecks to your organization. So, if all you're doing with AI is producing more code, doesn't actually mean you're going to be shipping more code into production. So There's still going to be code reviews that are required. You're going to have to run everything through your CI and CD pipelines. And it's senior developers who feel the biggest negative impact from these problems. And in fact, I really believe, for this, that structured rollouts are the name of the game. There was a recent research article from Google that found that using a structured rollout, there was a 21% velocity improvement for what they call enterprise grade tasks. So they gave, a range of developers from, the most junior all the way up to the most senior, a structured way to use generative AI. And on average, the senior developer, on average, they saw a 21% improvement. The improvement was actually bigger than that for the senior developers. And then lastly, security always comes up. It's a very, recurring topic, but it's going to continue to shift to the left and be more integrated into your developers' environments. So, you're going to be detecting vulnerabilities much earlier. Developers will be empowered to catch issues much earlier before they even hit, like your CI/CD pipeline, for example. And your senior developers really need, the support and enablement so that the burden of maintaining a security posture doesn't fall onto them. So I want to get your guys' insight. Like, how do you think that senior developers are going to be impacted over the next year?
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic. I think there's two things that are going to happen with senior developers. First of all, I think we have whoever is a senior developer today, they kind of grew without AI, supporting them. And I think what it will cause, or what causes, you have now in key positions in some companies, people who actually learn the code base on their own. AI is assisting you to accelerate fast. And these people are going to be assets. It's going to be really, really hard to lose them. There's something also with senior developers that are, again, didn't grow up on AI supporting them. That they have, I think, and it's debatable, willing to hear other opinions, this creativity thing going on, because they don't just say, let's say, they get a task, hey, you should do this. They're the people that can say, hey, let's refactor this entire area. Maybe let's change the product and do these type of things. And I think the senior developers of 10 years from now won't have the same knowledge, because they're going to use a lot of AI to gain the knowledge and then rely on it a lot more. So I predict the senior developers of now are going to be a major asset. I would say the second thing, the senior developers that are going to be here in 10 years from now are going to be a 5-people team. They're going to activate agents that take pick up, simple tasks from a Jira queue and work for them. They're going to have agents that do AI-based review. They're going to have agents that fix SRE problems that they see, security. So it's almost like a strong senior developer would be this time really like a 10x or a 50x multiplier. So it's really, really going to be interesting, how senior developers evolve over the next years.
Nothing else to add. Is there anything are there any skills that you think senior developers should be focusing on right now?
You're asking what new skills senior developers should be focusing right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more, it's definitely go and see and experiment with AI, lead the way. Don't just settle for, again, the assisted stuff. I'm asking my senior developers right now. My engineering manager is asking senior developers right now to go and experiment with agentic use cases. And so those type of things. But I think, again, like I said before, it's also very, very important not to lose this spark of creativity and offer ideas and all these type of things that makes a senior developer great.
Yeah, something that I'm actually hearing a lot is the notion of like a product-oriented engineer, like engineers who can actually take an idea or a technical challenge all the way down to the end user of that challenge. So even if you're a back-end engineer that's optimizing a database query or something like that, you should still be thinking about the real-world usage of that query to make sure that it's optimized for that situation. Just on that point, you asked the question, what should senior developers be thinking about? I think of senior developers as what the industry calls 10x developers, right? It's not necessarily that they produce 10x the amount of code. It is that they have 10x the amount of impact by architectural choices, by best practices, what have you. And all this talk we hear about AI is so focused on developer productivity as measured by throughput, saying, hey, AI is going to generate more lines of code. Who cares? Doesn't matter. The question is, what code is going to drive the most impact on your end customers? And so I think senior developers can lead the charge in focusing on kind of developer efficacy as opposed to throughput. And by that, what I mean is when you contribute a set of code, how do you then A/B test that? How does that impact the end customer? Does that drive the intended business impact? And then how do you bring it back, close the loop, and figure out, how do you prioritize the source code that can ultimately impact the end user, right? So I think that's where a 10x developer can have a 100x impact by closing the loop end to end, pushing code faster, but higher quality code, measure with the end customer impact, and use that to learn better best practices. And then that can become a training ground or coaching ground for some of the junior developers to focus on higher impact work. So I think this whole concept of developer efficacy, productivity as measured by customer impact, not lines of code in terms of throughput, is an evolution this industry needs to go towards. Yeah, so I want to throw it back to the audience for just a moment. I'm curious, through show of hands again, are you implementing a practice today to help your senior engineers specifically adopt generative AI versus just a general practice? Again, one hand. I don't know who that is, but do you want to share what you're doing? I love putting people on the spot. Yeah, the microphone's up there. I appreciate it.
More kind of encouraging my senior to explore, but basically just so we can save time. So go explore and do more of that, just so we can cut off time. And often what I see, and kind of maybe there's a follow-up question here, because you need to, developers, they're coding in coding language, so that's how they express themselves. And now all of a sudden they need to express themselves actually in English, which kind of makes the product management in a way redundant, I would say. So kind of pushing my engineers to think more of a product managers and, set the prompt to solve about the problem in the context of a user, or like the value that you're trying to produce, and kind of as an outcome, like, okay, now let's help me to code it. So that's really where kind of pushing my seniors to work.
Yeah, and I think that, something that really resonates with me on that is that as you chat, like these AI tools can actually be pretty good devices to role play your user, right? Like, I think developers aren't always as accustomed to meeting customers and talking directly to users. It can be difficult for them sometimes, but ChatGPT or tools like that can actually be really great at just telling it to, be this user and answer my questions, or how would a user interact with a system like this? So, I think there definitely is a lot of potential there to help your developers think more like a product manager and to think more about product design. And I want to keep us moving forward into our next prediction. And it's a topic that I think you really can't discuss developer productivity without talking about developer experience, because they really do seem to come hand in hand. And, I hear a lot from engineering leaders that they have a hard time understanding how to invest in developer experience. I think it's not going to go away, but if you can do it in a strategic way, there's some pretty big benefits that you can achieve. So some of the technologies that we're looking at in this space is particularly around like unifying development environments. So, things will become more integrated over time. We'll see more seamless coding to testing deployment tool chains. Imagine a world where like code reviews start to become more automated inside of the IDE as the developer writes their code. You can have AI agents or other services running within the IDE and telling them that like there's a problem before they even send it to their team. We also think that documentation and knowledge sharing are potentially dramatically going to shift. The point we have on the slide, I believe, says it's the end of documentation, but really I think what we're seeing is developers are relying more on automated documentation and AI assistants to generate and maintain their documentation. And I really think that there's going to be some significant improvements to knowledge sharing that comes out of this. As like knowledge bases start to get replaced by like hyper-focused LLMs. I think about moving from like an internal forum to like a knowledge base that is updated automatically through a natural language interface. And then there's also, just the constant force of asynchronous development. So, the pandemic normalized remote work culture. There is, these recent return to office mandates that have come out. But virtually every modern enterprise is distributed to some degree today. And so, if your tools don't support asynchronous development today, they really are, even if you are an office-based culture, you really are sort of handicapping yourself. So wanted to see what you guys had to say about that.
Yeah. Really good topic, because think about it now. The way you ask the questions is like the problems that cause developer experience not to be great. Now, when I take a step back, and there's a debate out there, how should we measure developer experience? And, there's been companies who are saying quantitative metrics is the best way to do it. You got to measure build times, you got to measure flaky tests, or how much time I wait for an environment, etc. And then there's others that say, hey, let's do an academic survey or something like that. And I say nobody wins. The most important thing to do is to have a framework to fix the problems. Whatever metrics you collect, whether you do it quant or qual or both of them, it's just the beginning. And the topics you spoke about, like, are how do I improve the day-to-day of the developers to have a better developer experience? By the way, not because, some of it is how I want my developers to have a work-life balance, etc. But at the end of the day, I want them to be more productive. So what we're missing in this space, I think, and it's hard for me not to say that in LinearB we're attacking this problem, is some sort of framework and an infrastructure that will help you solve these problems, that will help you see, hey, you know what, reviewing code is like, we talked about PRs and small PRs and all that in the previous session. Reviewing code is my bottleneck. Let me deploy an automation or an AI-based solution that helps me like overcome this problem. So instead of like staying in the argument, qual or quant or both, let's take it to the next step. Let's build like an infrastructure and a product that lets you solve these problems. So I think it's really, really important to go to the next phase. And here's the future that I see. Maybe it's a bold prediction. We started seeing it with customers, but I think it's going to get more and more extreme. People that have awareness to developer experience and they want to improve it, they're going to go from, an hour from commit to production to minutes, because they're going to have AI agents working for them, solving pipeline issues. They're going to go, and people who are stuck behind, they're going to still stay with 20 days of a cycle time. So the gap is going to get so big between these companies. That's why I'm eager, that's one of the problems that I'm really passionate about, and I'm eager to help organizations solve this problem.
I was going to perhaps in my mind, I think about developer experience. It comes up as a new term, and I'm like, what does that even mean? Because we talk to 6,000 companies a year, and now just this trend of developer experience, developer productivity, and it's coming up. So when we think about it internally, it's kind of simple framework where developers are doing so much more. I told you they're doubling down as data scientists, they're scanning code in some cases, they're taking security responsibility. These are things they want to do, and these are things that have an impact on customers and the business, right? And then there's things they don't necessarily want to do that can be automated. Developer experience is achieving both of those goals. Take the highest impact things and help them do it more effectively. Take the lower impact things that have to be done and automate it, right? And then you iterate on that so that your most valuable resources, developers, can drive the biggest impact to your business without losing sight of all the other things that need to be done, right? So finding that balance, I think, is super important. And without kind of focus on developer experience, you can achieve that. And what's encouraging is more and more companies now seem to have a dedicated title for developer experience. There's a dedicated budget for developer experience. So companies are recognizing that, hey, by focusing on developer experience, you can get a very clear ROI, but driving much more kind of quality code and business output while keeping developers happy, so they don't lose, you don't lose them to your competition.
Yeah, and this is actually something I would like to take to our audience now. So how many, through a raise of hands, have ever heard, usually this comes from a non-engineering person, but have ever heard the statement, I don't understand why we invest in DevX? Have you ever heard that statement? Wow, no one has never heard that. Oh, I've got Tara in the back. Thank you, Tara. Tara, did you successfully navigate that situation and make the argument for DevX? And if so, would you like to come share how you did that? We're all anticipating.
God, I have so many hot takes right now, so I'm trying to focus on this particular question. So, whether we call it developer experience, developer productivity, back in the day, we called it, the build release team or the infrastructure team or the platform team, right? It's the act of supporting the ecosystem and the environment within which a developer works has had many names over the years. And as someone who has done almost entirely this work, most of the time I've had to justify existence because, I'm listening to Dharmesh, it's like, oh, look at the developers focusing on the right thing. Well, how do you define the right thing, I think, is the interesting thing. And so if a platform team, infrastructure team, DevX team is able to be a multiplier and you can show the data that supports that, then that becomes a really easy argument, which is why, things like these reports come out. I think it's increasingly less of an issue. But for the first 20 years of my career, it was absolutely an issue. And what you had to show every year when budget season came around is what value add are you contributing. So I will pause there. Otherwise, I will totally derail your whole conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. No, that's wonderful. So I'd actually like to ask both of you, if someone were investing into DevX today, where would you recommend they start now?
I would say always start with measuring, but don't stop there. Find your best way to measure, whether it's I'm a strong believer in quantitative metrics. I always say when you only base on qual, I always give this analogy of a sales leader coming into staff meeting, Dharmesh, imagine a sales leader coming into a staff meeting and saying, I don't need the empiric metrics around my funnel in sales. I don't know. I don't need to know how much SQLs, opportunities, customers I have. I'm just basing myself on what the reps are telling me. So I think the same thing needs to happen in engineering. You gotta have empirical data, and qualitative can definitely support it. So I would start with measuring definitely, but it wouldn't stop there. Because the most frustrating thing is to see the problems and not giving tools to fix that.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And yeah, I think I'll just move on to our next prediction then, and that's, it starts to get into how the roles of developers are likely to change over the coming years. So we've talked a little bit tonight about how AI, Gen AI, machine learning stuff like that is becoming a thing that really all developers need to be focused on. So, developers are going to be asked to have a broader skill set. There's going to be more emphasis on integrating AI and machine learning into applications, using various models. And many developers are going to need to become much more familiar with things like building, deploying, leveraging, monitoring AI models and integrating them into applications, even if they don't specialize with these tools. And in fact, there's a lot of products that are coming out that are specifically for developers who who aren't specialists in this. There's also, we think maybe a good chance that productivity as a whole, is going to start to become a job function for people. So, we to the point where we may even see the rise of DevOps engineers that focus more on productivity, like a productivity engineer, for example. And then the last two I actually added at your request, Ori, so I'm interested to see what you had to say about them. But, two technologies that really seem to be becoming more commonplace at a pretty rapid rate are cloud-based IDEs and serverless technologies. So I know some of these get a little groan because we get some groans from people because they've tried these tools in the past and haven't been completely convinced. But, more things are moving into the cloud. They're offering better integrations and debugging and collaboration. And then serverless is just making it easier to decouple development from the actual deployment services. So how do you think that, developers' roles are going to change over the coming years?
Yeah, so cloud-based IDs definitely are very interesting the way they evolve. I actually want to focus on the roles that I see that, I think going to be new. So we talked about the fact that almost every engineer, every developer would need to know, how do I adopt AI, whether full stack, backend, whatever I do. Then I think that two interesting roles, or this one is the entire, think about InfoSec. I think there's going to be people that specialize in InfoSec in the AI. I can see it right now in contracts that we have. Which one does it use? Where do you deploy them? How do we attack IP? How do we make sure that the models don't learn on the data we send them? There's going to be a role of InfoSec just, specializing on AI. So that's one thing. And then I think there's two interesting roles that I think are going to evolve. I think there's going to be a head of AI development. And if we build the right infrastructure for these people, they're going to be the people that are going to say, okay, here's where we're allowing agents to take, again, a simple task out of a Jira queue and start working on them. And here's the policy where we're not allowing you to do it. Here is where we're allowing, to something to find a bug and fix it automatically. And here's what we're not allowing you to do. So you're going to have a head of AI development that kind of implements defines the policies, implements them. And then you're going to have the practitioners that kind of, hopefully they have a product to do it with, they kind of like write the rules, write the policies that says like, maybe in this microservice I'm allowing more, or maybe in this microservice I'm less permissive. So I foresee like these two very, very interesting roles: the head of AI development and kind of the practitioner that does it day to day. That are gonna. I don't know if they're gonna sit inside a developer experience team or in other teams, but these are two very interesting roles that I can see, arising.
Maybe slightly different takes, like full stack engineer. It was kind of a merger between front end, back end. I think in the next couple of years, full stack implies front end, back end, security scanning, and AI engineering. It's like, full stack engineer will expect it to touch all those aspects, right? And the second thing I see changing is, even though engineers are not responsible for some of the downstream things when it comes to CI/CD selection, when it comes to observability tools, it comes to feature flagging tools, if you will, they still becomes heavy influencers. A lot of developers are trying these tools and influencing what the standard should be for other teams to standardize on. So a lot of purchase decisions within IT are going through the route of developers trying them and influencing them. And the things developers do kind of encompasses a much larger exposure area, if you will. But you may ask, how do you do all that? It's because a lot of the work that they had to do, can be automated now, which frees up time for them to do the more strategic work.
It's great. So I'm wondering from our audience, by a show of hands again, how many of you have put somebody whose job it is to lead your effort to work AI into your product, either on the engineering or the product side? Yeah, I see a couple hands back there. Do either of you want to share your opinion? I know you both have had plenty of opportunity to do so. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I love that we're getting like one hand each time, so I have one person to call out.
That's right. We try to have two this time just to mix it up. Wait, remind me of the question. It just sounded like something we've done. So, like integrating AI into our product. Is that the question? So
yeah. So specifically, like, have you put somebody in charge of it? Like, do you have a team who's focused on that effort?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's for us, people know what we do with CI/CD. So we have kind of two facets of that. One, we look at how we can improve the workflow for our customers, right? So how do we integrate capabilities into our product based on, I was spare you the details of all that. The other is actually that we have a large number of customers who are doing the same thing, right? So they're trying to figure out how to deliver software with AI capabilities, however you want to describe it, backed by LLMs. How do we help them build and validate those capabilities so they can confidently put them out into production? So like our whole ecosystem is changing. And I think, now I'm going to just go on a tangent and talk about what you were talking about before, but like, as we look at this, I think a lot of what you're talking about here is like the next year, the next 2 years, right? It's like, how do we subtly change what we do from a software perspective? Right? How do I get some code generated so I don't just write the code kind of thing? But one of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about, given that we're in the flow of software delivery, is how does software fundamentally change 5 years from now, 10 years from now? There was a quote up there about 2040, right? Like, are we just generating the same programming languages that we were writing ourselves in 2024? I don't think so. I think we'll construct software in entirely different ways that we haven't reasoned about yet. And so if you're in the software delivery industry, you need to be thinking about that. Not just like, can I write code faster because I have a coding assistant, but do we write code? Like, is that how we give machine instructions when the machines are generating the instructions and the machines are receiving the instructions? Why are we writing it in a programming language designed for humans, right? And what happens when, can you just link, like right now we ask a model, can you please generate a web page so that if someone hits this URL, this web page will be returned? Why don't we tell them, the model, when someone hits that URL, return a web page that looks like this, right? Like, why are we writing code at that point? I don't know what the answer is to that question, but I think there's much more interesting problems 5 years out and 10 years out than there are in the next 12 months. So we're thinking about all of them.
That's my answer. Yeah, it's great that you can have that long-term insight too. It's, I think, very valuable to have. So that brings us to our last prediction that we have, and this is actually one that I added to this list because it's come up in a couple of conversations I've had on Dev Interrupted, specifically one with Burns Rucker here that will actually be coming out here next month in January. And that's like the rise of this concept of citizen developers, and specifically, I think you're going to see non-technical and less technical people start to play more technical roles within your organization. So, low code, no code, these platforms have been around for a while. Usually when I bring them up like this, audiences like this roll their eyes and think, oh, that'll never happen. It's not going to work for us. But these platforms are continuing to evolve, and non-developers are being given more and more capabilities to deploy applications, integrate with various systems, with APIs and databases. And, non-engineering teams are going to become less dependent on developers to produce things that sometimes actually go into production. It may not be your central app or service, but they are often building things that touch customers in some ways. And as a part of this, I think we're also likely to see quite a few more integrated tool collaboration tools. So, expect more sophisticated tooling that blends developer tools and IDEs with more feature-rich capabilities. So kind of imagine like Google Docs for code. And this would allow, teams of all technical levels, so a variety of technical levels to collaborate on code, to discuss changes and resolve issues, in environments that are more familiar with them. So I'd like to hear what you all think about, this rise. We've already talked about senior developers and how they're likely to be impacted, but there's also going to be a lot of impacts to people who aren't nearly as advanced in their capabilities. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it didn't start yesterday. Low code, no code is like, especially in internal IT applications, is getting a lot of momentum. I think AI will accelerate it because if I have a challenge and I don't know what to write in the Apex, trigger inside Salesforce and the custom objects, I will ask ChatGPT and it will tell me the answer. So it will only accelerate this type of problems. I think just for us, I've seen 3 cases lately where, in all the go-to-market sales stack, we had people coming, hey, how can we create a better architecture, etc., and all the challenges that we know that are going to come with people that are working with low code, no code. I even had finance, the VP of finance is here, saying, hey, can we get somebody to integrate Zapier to another system, etc. It's happening all over the place, and it won't stop. I think the 2 challenges that it will bring, number one, it will create a lot of shadow IT, and not just, vetted apps that you can't use. Even if it's apps that you can use, you might use them extensively and give them more access that you want to give them. So that's one problem. And the second problem, it will create, unless you put a lot of energy into it and treat it almost like as, regular development, a major technical debt. I can see companies that have broken Salesforce architecture, and the price they pay on the speed of go-to-market operations or others is big. So it is interesting, it is going to accelerate, and the problems are going to get bigger.
In many ways, we've kind of seen this before. If you remember, 10 years ago, it used to be that any company that was getting started had to first spend $10 million on getting a data center by servers. And then cloud came along and you're like, oh, I can build my application on AWS in a matter of, months and, for 1/10 the cost, right? And then the focus shifted to software engineering. And now the same thing seems to be happening here. Now it feels like, hey, software developers can get the first application going. You need a citizen developer who can go build it. A product manager can use a natural language interface and get some prototype of a product they can test with the customer. And we're seeing this happen. Like, I've never seen companies that are 5, 10 people who get the first product out in 6 months and get to like $2 million in revenue across 100 customers. You're like, wow, this is crazy, right? So, and I think the trend it's pointing to is that, it's becoming much easier to generate logical blocks of code using AI and automate the pull request merges and downstream delivery of that code, and ultimately test with customers much faster. So this trend is going to continue. And as a result of that, I think the emphasis of software is going to focus a lot more on customer delight, the user experience, time to value. But I think it definitely accelerates the pace of innovation, the same way we saw cloud accelerate the pace of, company launches 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think one thing that sometimes gets overlooked that's really critical in this is that when you have people getting involved in the development process who don't have a lot of experience doing it, they aren't familiar at all with the processes that a typical development team works. So they may not even know things as simple as like PRs should be smaller because they're easier to review, right? Like, so there's actually a level of just normalizing that has to happen often with when you have large. We've seen this with some especially larger companies we've spoken to, where they hire large numbers of developers straight out of college who maybe come from less technical backgrounds, and just some of the most basic practices that developers normalize pretty quickly from maybe just a year or two experience. These people have almost no awareness of. So being able to like establish norms around, how, like what we expect in our code, making sure that you also use the same tools that you use for your development stacks. And, even if it's low code, it should still be run through your CI/CD system and have a QA process and, all the various typical things that would come along with software development. But you're often dealing with the group of people that really don't have a lot of experience with those things. And I think that has to be accounted for.
Yeah, it's even like most of the code you develop in Salesforce and in these IT applications, it's not even like maintained in in source control, or it's local into the environments. I know there's companies who are trying to solve this problem, but yeah, the practices and the methodologies are behind.
Yeah, so those are our predictions for today. And unfortunately, we don't have time for a Q&A because we're a little behind our schedule. But Ori, Dharmesh, I want to thank you for coming in today. So if you all can give them a round of applause.
Thank you very much.